Greetings and welcome. Now, Brighton is a minefield of traffic at the moment. The seafront road is still blocked off from this horrendous fire that we had on the hotel on the seafront. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to do a video that I've wanted to do for a while. Today, I want to talk about the fundamental differences, the basic differences between Labour economic policy and Conservative economic policy. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is probably not what you were expecting. But basically, I am in no way, shape or form an expert on economics. I find the topic very, very challenging. I have a pretty decent wealth of knowledge on politics in general, just through my sheer interest in the topic, but I've always found economics quite hard to get my head around. I'm not university educated. I drive a van for a living. The majority of us aren't university educated, which is exactly why I want to make this video, because when it comes to topics that I find quite challenging, I like to just strip them down to their core basics. Because it's impossible. You can't understand every single aspect of which party's policy is going to affect this way, that way, every single aspect. If you're into economics and that's your thing, great, you can understand that. But for the normal person, we just need to understand the basics. And that's what I want to talk about today. So, because I kind of feel that we live in a society where everyone seems to think they're an expert on everything. If you spend much time on Twitter or YouTube comment section, everyone seems to think they're an expert. They're an expert on climate change. They're an expert on government policy, on economics. And it's just unrealistic, and it's just not true. It's not true. But we can understand the basics of topics that we find quite difficult. So now, obviously, anyone that is a regular viewer of my channel will know that obviously I'm going to have a bias in my opinion. I can't stand the Conservative Party. I can't stand what they've done to this country over the last 13 years. But everything that I talk about, the Tories, in this video is not opinion. It's fact. We're in the unique position with the Tory party's economic policy, is the fact that we've seen it unravel, so we know what its effects on the country have been. We don't have that with the Labour Party because they haven't been in power for the last 13 years, so we can't see what their policies implemented, how they would have affected the country, but we can with the Tories. So every time I talk about the Conservatives, okay, I'm biased, of course, and I'll say things with negative impact, but they're all facts. They're all everything that we've observed over the last 13 years. But anyway, I just wanted to clear that up first. So let's get started. So we'll start with the Conservative Party. Now, I mean, I could go back to the 80s, the 70s, the 60s if I want to, but we'd have a 2-3 hour long video. But what I really want to focus on in this video is basically what we've seen with this current government. So this current Conservative government came in power in 2010, just after the 2008 financial crisis, and they came in with an economic policy of austerity, of balancing the books, as they call it, treating the country's finances like a household economy, where you bring in a certain amount of money and you don't spend any more than that. You don't accumulate debt, and you try and bring the debt down. So they were voted in on a policy of cutting public services and trying to bring down the national debt. That was their aim. And they've pretty much upheld that same economic policy over the last 13 years. Little bit of differences, Liz Truss, we'll get into in a bit. But they have basically kept up that economic policy of not spending on public services to try and reduce the debt. That's what they've done over the last 13 years. They've cut funding for the NHS, they've cut funding to train British nurses, so we've had an abundance of lack of staff for the NHS. They've cut funding for councils, they've cut police officers. Pretty much every single government agency has been cut. Asylum, this is why we see a massive backlog in asylum claims at the moment, because that government department was massively cut back in funding. It's had its role. So that was their economic plan. How has that turned out? That's what I'm saying. We get to see what effects that's had on the country over the last 13 years, where we currently have These are just facts, like I say. I'm trying to be unbiased, but I'm just saying the facts. I'm saying the facts. We've got more homelessness than we've ever had before. We've got more poverty than we've ever had before. We've got more food banks than we've ever had before. The NHS is in massive decline, with opinion polls at their lowest, with waiting times at their highest. And ironically, after all these cuts that we've had, the Conservative Party have still borrowed a considerable amount of money, even more than the previous Labour Party before them. I know we had COVID, but this is even pre-COVID. So this is... Are you moving? Move. He's on his phone. You know he's on his phone. They're always on their phone. The abundance of people at traffic lights that are still on their phone. But yeah, this is what we have. After 13 years of austerity, we have depleted public services and we have borrowing at an all-time high. This is what we have. So let's flip over to the Labour Party and what they propose. So obviously, oh, actually, sorry, I didn't... I forgot Liz Truss. So austerity was the basic plan for the Tory party over the last 13 years, but there was factions of the Conservative Party that wanted something different. I guess this kind of started with Brexit. There were a lot of factions of the Conservative Party that wanted a Singapore on Thames style economic policy. So that kind of got the ball rolling with Brexit. They didn't want any EU interference. They wanted Singapore on Thames, which is basically massive tax cuts for businesses, making businesses rich, and hopefully, I guess that will trickle down to the people down below. the opinion on trickle down economics is that it will create jobs for people at the bottom, and that money will eventually trickle down. But there's certain factions in the Conservative Party that wanted that. The ball will come rolling with Brexit, but it really sort of came over into Liz Truss's tenure, her 2-month Prime Minister tenancy, where she put forward a policy of borrowing massive amounts of money in order to cut taxes for the rich. That completely tanked the economy. It spooked the markets because they didn't know how we'd pay for this. And it was absolutely catastrophic for the country, which put us in even more worse financial situation than what we find ourselves before. So yeah, that was another part of Conservative economic policy over the last 13 years. So now, on the opposite, we go over to Labour. Now, I'm going to take this opportunity while I'm parked up to go for the other side, the complete opposite, the Labour Party. What have the Labour Party been promising economic-wise over the last 13 years? Now, pretty much the opposite of what the Conservatives have been doing. In recent times with Keir Starmer, we've deviated from that somewhat, but we'll get into that in a bit. But predominantly over the last 13 years, they've been offering the complete opposite economically to what the Conservatives have. I guess that started with when Ed Miliband became leader. He fought his brother, David Miliband, for the leadership of the Labour Party. David was always seemed more centrist, more sort of Tony Blair, economic-minded. Ed Miliband was more socialist, more left-wing. It ramped up even further when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party to fight the 2017-2019 election. So what are the basics of what Jeremy Corbyn's Labour were offering during those years? We had the Conservatives offering public service cuts, more borrowing, and depleted public services, which was basically what they were offering. The Labour Party were offering massive borrowing, but to invest in public services. Now, my understanding of the way this economics works is you borrow a lot. Yes, you take on a lot of debt, you borrow a lot of money. But the theory is if you invest that into public services, it will help the economy grow. So if you have a well-run NHS service with not massive waiting lists, more people will be in work, they won't be off sick, they'll be contributing to the economy. If you can sort out poverty and homelessness, if you can really crack down, invest money and crack down on reducing poverty and homelessness, more people are being productive and paying tax and working in the economy. If you can take things into public ownership, like public transport, trains, if you can have cheaper trains, well-run trains, if you have cheaper trains, there's more money in people's pockets to spend to put into the economy. If you have better running public transport, people are getting to work on time, they're not missing days off work, they're paying tax, they're putting into economy. Do you ever hear those stats when there's like a massive car crash on the M25 or something, and they always say, the effect on the economy is millions of pounds of people not getting into work and such like that? Well, it's that theory. You know, if you have better public transport, more people are paying into the economy. If you can fix healthcare, transport, all these things, it will boost the economy in the long run. That's the basic principle of what Jeremy Corbyn's style Labour Party was trying to implement. Now, like I said, we've got a Keir Starmer leadership now, which is much more towards the Tony Blair style economics. It's definitely deviated. We don't have a manifesto yet for the next election, so we don't know too much. And to be honest, Keir Starmer's not really giving much away about his economic policy. But by the looks of it, it doesn't look like he's going to do anything drastic, and it even looks like it's not really that much different to what the Conservative Party are going to offer. He's not putting forward any big policies about public ownership of water and things like this and other things. He hasn't talked about massive investment in public service, none of these things. But we don't know. We don't know until the manifesto comes out. But it looks like the plan, the economic plan of a Keir Starmer Labour government is to try and attract Tory voters that are a little bit scared of these more socialist Jeremy Corbyn style policies. There's a lot of talk from a lot of Labour supporters that this is the way of getting Labour into government, and then in their second term they may want to introduce more socialist policies. Who knows? Who knows? But I also want to go into why people didn't vote for this. So Jeremy Corbyn, starting with Ed Miliband in 2015, Jeremy Corbyn in 2017 and 19, put these economic policies forward. The public didn't want it. Now, there was a lot involved with why Jeremy Corbyn lost both elections. 2019 was a very Brexit-heavy a lot of people didn't want to vote for Labour because they wanted to introduce a second referendum on Brexit. There were lots of things involved, but purely economic wise, people are scared of massive borrowing. Like I say, it's strange because the Conservative Party have borrowed insane. I mean, we're talking even before, this is 2019, we're talking before COVID, before any of that. The Tories have been borrowing massively, more than the previous Labour government. But people were scared of massive borrowing. A lot of older folks, especially my dad's generation, remember the 70s with the strikes. They didn't want the unions getting too powerful again, so Jeremy Corbyn would be very, very pro-union. I wasn't around in those times. Like I say, limited knowledge. I'm not an expert on these, but from what I know and what I hear, the unions did try and start getting greedy, and I don't know. This is just what I hear. These are the opinions of people of my dad's generation, and I hear this over and over again, that the unions were getting too greedy in the 70s. They had too much power and it went too much the other way, and there's a lot of fear over that. So I guess that was the fear of this style of economic policy. But I'll round it up by basically saying, for the next election, we don't know what Keir Starmer is going to put forward, but you basically got the choice of more of the same if you go with the Conservatives. More of the same. Sunak currently is reverting from Liz Truss's wild Singapore on the Thames free market capitalist craziness, and is going for a bog standard back to David Cameron. Let's reduce public spending, let's cut the deficit. It's more of the same, and all we're going to see is just more and more depleted public services, the NHS going into disrepair, education, councils, all these things are going to be run down. Hopefully Labour will put forward something that's completely different, but who knows? We'll find out. What are your thoughts, guys? Have I said anything that's completely wrong? Please let me know in the comment section. I really wanted to put this video out there because it's basically a video for people like me. It's economics for dummies. It's Labour and Conservative economics for dummies. And obviously I know I have my bias, like I keep saying, but I've tried to just put it plain and simple, the facts of the two parties, two economic policies. Till next time, if you watch the video, maybe like the video, maybe subscribe, and take care. We'll see you soon.